Your Legislators is made possible in part by the generous financial support of MAPE members, making Minnesota clean waters, safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans. Live from St. Paul, Minnesota, we welcome you to another season of Your Legislators, a roundtable discussion featuring state lawmakers who are prepared to answer your questions and discuss important issues affecting citizens of Minnesota. Now, here's your moderator for tonight's program, Barry Anderson.
Good evening and welcome to Your Legislators. We're delighted that you could join us on this snowy evening as parts of Minnesota get pounded by 6 or 8 or 10 inches, maybe a foot, who knows. I just want to remind everyone that just in a few days the Twins open at Target Field for their home opener next week. So theater of seasons and all of that. But while the weather is going on, we have our usual distinguished panel of guests to help us unravel the mysteries of St. Paul. We're short 2 guests tonight because the House is in session, but our 2 representatives from the Senate will be here to carry the load, and I'm sure they'll do a great job. We have with us tonight from Twin Valley a guest who's been with us in the past, District 4, Senator Kent Eakin. Did I pronounce that right?
That is correct.
Tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, again, my name's Kent Eakin. I'm in my first term in the state Senate this year, and I represent District 4, which includes all of Norman County and all of Clay County and 3.5 townships in Becker County. The population centers would be Moorhead and Detroit Lakes. And prior to that, I served 5 terms in the Minnesota House. So, so I've in my 12th year in the legislature. I serve on the Health and Human Services Finance Committee. Also serve on the Higher Education Committee. I serve on the Capital Investment Committee, on the Jobs, Ag, and Rural Development Committee, and also on the Elections Subcommittee. And I'm a teacher by trade. I taught high school for many years before going into the legislature. I still do some teaching as an adjunct instructor. I've done some at MSUM, Moorhead. I've also taught at Detroit Lakes Tech and Community College. And I have a wife and 4 children. My oldest is in college right now in Moorhead. The other 3 are in high school and elementary school at Norman County East. So.
And just to give our viewers a sense of how large your district is in comparison to, say, a Senate district in Minneapolis or St. Paul, can you give us some sense of the geography in terms of travel time and distances?
Sure. And actually, my House district used to be bigger geographically because it was all small towns. And I had all our parts of 5 counties then. So it was a very sprawling district, and it still is a very large district. But now I have Moorhead and Detroit Lakes, so I have 2 more concentrated population centers, and Moorhead is half my district, actually, right. Moorhead and Oakport Township. So, but again, it's much bigger than the metropolitan districts, even with those 2 population centers.
Well, we're delighted you could join us, and we'll have a chance to talk about some of the issues that are of concern in northwestern Minnesota. Also joining us, frequent guest on this program going back many years from Lakeville, Senator Dave Thompson. Senator Thompson, tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. Yes, Dave Thompson, and I live in Lakeville, and my district includes Lakeville, Farmington, and then a large chunk of southern Dakota County right down to the Northfield border. I'm in my 2nd term in the Senate, was elected the first time in 2010. And I currently serve on the State Government Committee, Education Policy, Full Tax Committee, and then I'm the minority ranking member on the Tax Reform Division. My day job has been practicing law in the past, small business lawyer, and then also did a radio program and some TV commentary. My wife, Rhonda, and I have been married for 28 years, and we have a 20-year-old daughter and an 18-year-old son.
I think we were discussing this. You've got a daughter in college and an 18-year-old son ready to graduate from high school and get loosed on the world.
That's right. Yep. So. Empty nesters here in August. Hard to believe.
Yeah. We aren't going to go into the details. We'll leave that to another forum and someone else to ask the questions. But I think we should tell our viewers that you're actively participating in a little contest for a different office as well. And so maybe just take a couple of seconds and tell our viewers what that's all about.
Sure. I declared about 9 months ago now, a little over 9 months ago, to run for governor. So I'm seeking the Republican nomination along with 5 other contestants, and hopefully we'll earn the right to take on Governor Dayton in November.
And that contest, at least the endorsement piece of it, the nomination, of course, will occur at the primary, but the endorsement piece of it is the end of May.
Correct. May 31st, we will, either late on May 31st or in the wee hours of the morning on June 1st, we'll hopefully endorse a candidate for governor.
We'll read about it in the newspaper. We hope to be done with the legislature by that point, right? So.
Boy, if we're not, the Democrats are in trouble, because if we have a special session, it's their fault. So
all right, well, we'll leave the assessment of the blame to somebody else. We will talk perhaps a little bit about when you think we might go home, but let's jump right in with the questions from our viewers. From Montevideo, we have a viewer who wants to know what the stance is of our guests on the issue of medical marijuana, and whether the bill at present, which does not include smoking or home cultivation, passed this session, and what, if anything, our guests think might happen. So should we start with you, Senator Eakin?
Sure. And I have been a supporter of medical marijuana and intend to support it again. I actually was a co-author of the bill when it was passed a few years ago. We did pass a bill that was very narrowly focused. It was just for patients who were terminally ill that could use it, and it did pass. It was vetoed, however, and once again, the issue is back before us, and I don't think that it's going to be moving this year. We've already seen the passage of deadlines for committees, but I do think that it's going to continue to be an issue in the future. And I know the governor was talking about doing a study on the issue and trying to gather more information before moving forward on that issue.
Senator Thompson?
Yeah, I have said many times publicly that we have other drugs that are used for medicinal purposes, like, morphine, oxycodone, that are much stronger and more addicting than marijuana. So I have not closed the door to marijuana for medical use. In fact, I've left that door open. My concern is, because marijuana is still a federally defined as a Class 1 controlled substance, it can't be sold through pharmacies and the like, and so I have a lot of concern, frankly, about the ability to control production and distribution. And I have not seen the latest iteration of the bill since it got changed somewhat, but the early on version I certainly could not have supported. So for me, it boils down to, I can conceive of a way that I could support that, but it doesn't seem to be in the pipeline now. And it's interesting, this Governor Dayton has gone back and forth on this 3 or 4 times. It kind of seems like the last person he talks to is who he's with, and at this point it seems like the last person he talked to is opposed to it. So I agree with Senator Eakin. It doesn't appear like it's going anywhere this session.
And of course, because the legislature will be newly elected in November, any bills not passed die, and new bills would have to be introduced in January. Do I understand the process correctly?
Yes.
All right. Viewer from Wilmer is not a fan of the proposed expenditure for the Senate office building and is wondering what the status of that is. Senator Thompson, let's start with you.
Well, that was one of those things that I think came about in a way that really disturbs people out there and disturbs taxpayers. That got added into the tax bill late. It should have gone through the bonding process. It should be a bonding bill, which would require a supermajority to have passed it. And somehow the Senate Democrats made this a priority. It got put into the tax bill. It's a lavish $90 million building that we really don't need. And I think it is kind of a poster child for what is wrong with St. Paul. I mean, this governor has a bonding proposal out there for in excess of $1.1 billion. Only $69 million of that is dedicated to roads and bridges, when we have highways and so on in greater Minnesota that are unsafe and in need of repair. We have potholes in St. Paul to the point that it's just about unsafe to drive your car. And we're going to build a Senate office building. I don't understand how that is such a big priority for the Senate, but it seems to be. And the governor himself was very hard on the majority leader, Senator Bach, saying they're holding up a tax bill over this. I cannot understand why they're doing that.
And it isn't a big priority for the Senate Democrats, and it's actually nothing's being held up because of that. This issue, if you talk to the senators in the Capitol right now, we'd prefer to stay right in the Capitol because it's much nicer facilities there than anything that could be built. But the problem is that there's space that's needed at the Capitol for public space. They're talking about this building was built over 100 years ago. And things have changed a lot in the last 100 years. And the space needs do not accommodate all of the demands that are being made on that building currently. When you have people coming into the Capitol for major hearings on major bills, there's not enough room to accommodate all the people in the committee rooms, so they're out in the corridors, and it's very crowded. They have to watch from TV monitors. There's more space needed for bathrooms. That's they're going to be putting in more bathrooms. They're going to be putting in another set of elevators. They're going to be putting in another set of stairs. So all of this is going to require room. So that's why they need to move the senators out of the Capitol. And as much as we like it in the Capitol, we need to make room for the public, because it really is the people's building. It doesn't belong to us, the senators. It belongs to the people. And for that reason, we're going to have to find other accommodations. And I know there's been, a lot of misinformation that's been spread as far as the specifics of the building. We don't know exactly what the building is going to look like yet. But again, we're moving out just to give more room for the general public, which I think is important. Again, it is the people's building.
Well, the problem is the new Senate office building isn't going to house all of the senators. There are still going to be senators back at the Capitol.
I think the number I heard was 44. Is that right?
Yes. So that means there's a total of 67 senators. So 23 aren't going to the Senate office building, and the governor's space is increasing by 62% of the Democrats' plan. So this idea that it's for the public is a little bit thin. It's for the governor and it's for senators. And it is the wrong priority for Minnesota.
And I just thought I'd mention that we don't know yet if it's going to be all 67 senators that could be moved out or not, because in the House they still have to sign off. The Rules Committee still has to sign off on it. And there's a lot of discussion there about having all 67 senators moved out of the Capitol and into some other facility. And the facility that's looked at being built is north of the Capitol, just across the street.
I thought I saw an item on Twitter, and we know if it's on Twitter, it must be true.
Exactly.
I thought I saw an item on Twitter that the House was going to actually consider this tomorrow. Do you know whether or not that's correct? That there was that this House committee was going to consider it?
And I've read the same thing in the newspapers, so I assume that they probably are going to be taking it up tomorrow. I don't know if they'll be making a decision, but it looks like they'll be taking it up.
All right, well, stay tuned, as they say, right? So a viewer from that famous location, famous location in Minnesota, unidentified town, wants to know if there's any legislation moving on bike and snowmobile trails. This viewer is also concerned about making sure laws on such trails are enforced. And I think the viewer is concerned about traffic laws and safety laws and rules like that. So snowmobile and bike trails, anything going on in this session, Senator Thompson?
I'm not on the committee that deals with that, and I haven't seen anything come through tax yet that I recall, or if it wasn't a real substantive provision. So if there is anything going on, it hasn't come through one of my committees, and I haven't heard about it. Maybe Kent can help us, but I'm not familiar with much of anything.
Yeah, and I serve on the Capital Investment Committee, and there are a number of bike trails and multi-use trails that are being considered. I'm carrying a bill for one of those, the Heartland Trail between Detroit Lakes and Frazee. There's a section there that's ready to be constructed, and we are the only region in the state of Minnesota that doesn't have a regional trail at this point. So one of the reasons that we're I think, at the top of the list for having at least a part of that trail constructed is because we believe everybody in the state of Minnesota should have the same, amenities that others do. And these trails, they do certainly improve and add to the quality of life, and not just as recreational trails, but also because of health purposes. It certainly helps to improve health, and I think most importantly, it helps to generate more economic activity in the area. And these trails have been known to be very important economic boons to those areas where they've been constructed. And so I know the people up in our area, around the Detroit Lakes area especially, are very excited about having that trail constructed. And the trail, ultimately, the Heartland Trail, is to extend all the way from Moorhead to Park Rapids. And so I think the economic benefits are very strong for our area.
Let's talk about the bonding bill. This is the short session normally devoted to bonding legislation. Requires 60% vote, as I'm sure our viewers know. We've covered this in a number of programs. Senator Thompson, let's start with you, and I want to share with you a comment that Representative Hausman had shared with us last week, or maybe it was the week before, but she was with us and discussed the bonding bill and noted that had the amount of the bonding bill kept up with inflation, that number would be about $1.5 billion, and this legislature is talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion. Including the amount from last year, and she believes that that amount is lower than it should be. So maybe you could address that issue for our viewers and also talk about the bonding bill generally from your perspective.
Sure. Well, there's much more to a bonding bill than the total gross amount of the bill, and that is where are your priorities and what kinds of projects are you doing. And bonding is a legitimate function of government, obviously, because we bond or borrow, bonding is a fancy term for borrowing, to build infrastructure and things that are going to last over a period of time, so they get paid for by people over a period of time. But they're supposed to be projects that have statewide or regional significance, and we're not supposed to use the bonding bill for pork projects and that sort of thing. So my concern with the bonding bill is what kinds of things are we doing? We should be doing roads and bridges, infrastructure kinds of things. We should be maintaining our buildings at our universities and those kinds of things. We should not be building facilities in towns and cities and places just to help a particular member of the legislature. So when I look at a bonding bill, I look not only at the gross size of it, but I look at priorities, and I certainly don't think that we should take pride in trying to grow the bonding bill as big as we can based on the rate of inflation or that sort of thing. I think we should be responsible with the taxpayers' money.
Well, and I'd have to say that the capital investment bill over the past several years has not been sufficient, and that's the reason that we have a real big backlog of projects that are being proposed. We have only about $1 billion that we can appropriate through the bonding process, and there's over $4 billion worth of requests. So we have to prioritize and make sure we're picking the right priorities. And these funds go into the basic infrastructure of our state. We started off talking about trails, but that's a very, very small portion of the bonding bill. The biggest portion is going towards basic infrastructure needs, whether we're talking about roads and bridges, or if we're talking about our colleges and our universities and that infrastructure, or we're talking about flood mitigation projects, which is a top priority of mine in this session and on the Capital Investment Committee. In the Red River Valley, we have real needs there in finishing up flood mitigation projects. So there are numerous types of infrastructure projects that we need to fund in order to protect our communities, in order to make sure that we're able to thrive economically into the future. And these are some of the most basic needs. We're talking about wastewater facilities and things of that nature. And so we need to invest in these things in order to make sure that our state remains strong economically.
And I want to follow up that with a question from a viewer in Saginaw who echoes something that you said earlier, Senator Thompson. This viewer is concerned about roads and bridges and road repair, particularly in greater Minnesota. And without getting into the specifics, the viewer thinks that perhaps we should be doing more in that area. Now, how do you respond to that concern?
I agree, and I feel that we have been falling behind in that area, and I do think that, and bonding is one way that we fund some of those road and bridge needs, but we also need to focus on the revenue that we need for roads and bridges generally, and we get our revenue through the gas tax, we get it through the motor vehicle sales tax, license fees. Those are the things that we get the money from, and those monies are dedicated. And I think it's important for people to realize that these monies are dedicated towards transportation, and we need to increase that revenue stream in order to ensure that we maintain our roads and bridges in Minnesota, and that's absolutely essential to our economic vitality as well.
So you would say that it's not just bonding where we need to be spending more on roads and bridges,
right?
But the general transportation budget, which of course would be a project for next year,
right? And the gas tax has been falling behind over the last many years because obviously it's not keeping up with inflation, the inflationary increases in the cost of maintaining roads and bridges, and so I do think something needs to be done there as well.
Well, the people in Kent's district, frankly, have gotten the shaft. And in the area where I grew up in East Grand Forks, because we've had a very metro-centric transportation program, but worse yet, it's focused on trains instead of automobiles. And so a lot of money that could have been spent creating more lane miles in the Twin Cities, creating safer roads in southern Minnesota, down on Highway 14, up in northwestern Minnesota, where Kent is from, where I grew up. We've been diverting some of that money into trains that frankly aren't being used. And if you poll the public, they are much more interested in lanes as opposed to trains. And so it's not just let's grab more money. There has been a net nearly $2 billion tax increase in this biennium and $300 million in fees. We're taking plenty of money from the people. We've got to spend it more wisely. And Republicans have been saying, I've been saying all along, fix our roads and bridges, maintain them, build lane miles, make sure our greater Minnesota roads are safe. But the focus of power in the Twin Cities has been, no, let's build trains instead.
Well, I think it's important to note that the gas tax formula works well for rural Minnesota and for our area of the state. We get back more than what we put in, and we should, because we don't have the population base or the property tax base that's necessary to keep up with all the miles of roads that we have to maintain. So for us, it's a good deal, and we need to maintain that formula, which had been written, Representative Bernie Leder had a lot to do with the writing of that formula, and we need to maintain that type of structure for rural Minnesota to make sure that we get our fair share, and so for that reason, we do need to increase the amount of funding coming from the state, because if it doesn't come from the state, it falls back on property taxpayers, and that hits our area of the state the hardest. And that's what we've seen over the last 10 years until just this last year. This last year, we finally started to shift the burden away from property taxes. For the first time in a decade, in over a decade, we've seen property taxes actually go down in the state of Minnesota. And that's good for rural Minnesota. So what we did last year really is a benefit for rural Minnesota, making sure that we start developing a fair tax system that has a more equal burden across the state, instead of shifting so much of it onto our rural residents.
Oh, I have no idea where that number is coming from. Overall, property taxes went up about 1.5% in the state. Some people were beneficiaries, some people paid higher costs. 2/3 of Minnesota's 87 counties saw an increase in property taxes after this governor and the leadership in the Democratic legislature promised a reduction in property tax. They haven't gone down. Now, that being said, Kent is right that we do need to support the infrastructure in greater Minnesota. And this is one of those issues, and you see this in the legislature frequently, where you don't have as much a Republican-Democrat breakdown as you have a greater Minnesota metro area breakdown. This is where, yes, I want to take care of the metro. I live in the metro, but we really need to take care of greater Minnesota, where they have every bit as much right to get their food and other things to market, and not to mention getting our farm products from greater Minnesota shipped where they need to be. So we've got to take care of that transportation problem. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that property taxes did go down for the first time in a decade this year because of the efforts we made last year. And that's especially beneficial, again, for rural Minnesota, which I feel over the previous 10 years, prior to what we did last year, rural Minnesota was getting the shaft. But finally, we're getting a fair shake now. And I hope that we continue in this direction of making sure that we have a fair tax system that ensures that rural Minnesota is not the one that's being overly burdened with these property tax increases that we saw over the last decade.
And I gather there's some disagreement about that fact between the two of you about whether or not property taxes have gone down. Am I correct in that, Senator Thompson?
Yeah, I mean, what the Democrats are attempting to say is, well, we kind of gave it back in LGA. So we played the shell game. But the actual property tax number itself went up. That's math. It went up.
And you don't agree with that?
No, they went down, and it's partly because of the investments that we made in local government aid, which goes to cities out in rural Minnesota primarily.
But Ken, with all due respect, that's not property taxes going down. That's taking money out of one pocket and putting it in another. So the property tax problem wasn't fixed. It was just redistributed from somewhere else to try to give a net benefit. But the property tax burden itself in a vacuum has not gone down.
It has gone down, but I think it's important to note about LGA, local government aid, and also aid to counties, and also assistance to our schools. All of that was really designed to ensure that even in rural Minnesota, where we don't have a large population and where we don't have a significant property tax base, we still have good quality services at an affordable price. And over the last 10 years, LGA was cut significantly, and that's why we saw property taxes go through the roof during those last 10 years. And it's also the cuts to our colleges. It's why we've seen tuition go through the roof. It's why we've seen fees going through the roof. We are finally now developing a a fairer tax system that's less regressive and doesn't hit lower and middle income people in rural Minnesota so hard. And we need to continue that momentum, because we in rural Minnesota, we are not second-class citizens. We deserve to be treated as equals. And that's what the policies of last year finally started, was moving us in that direction of treating everybody in the state of Minnesota fairly and equally.
Senator Thompson, LGA, anything you want to say on that topic before we move on?
Well, sure. I mean, it's interesting. I agree with so much of what Kent is saying. It's just he's not willing to say why it's happened. The reason that the problems have existed with LGA for places, let's talk briefly about the purpose of LGA. Local government aid was put in place to help those towns and cities that have an insufficient tax base to meet their basic needs. So that's how it started, so that those towns would get help. Now the largest beneficiaries are Minneapolis, St. Paul, Duluth, because they've got the political power. So the reason that the towns in Kent's areas have taken a hit is so that we can give the money to Minneapolis, St. Paul, because we all know that there's no real estate to tax in Minneapolis, right? So the whole purpose for LGA was lost, and cities that weren't intended to be beneficiaries at all are sucking up the largest proportions of LGA, so the towns in Kent's areas are taking a bath on it. But that's not my fault. I don't believe in giving LGA to the towns and cities that don't need it. I believe in it for the places that need it. But the Democrats that control the legislature are by and large from the inner core metro area, and they get the money there.
Okay, the fact is that LGA primarily benefits the rural communities and cities of this state. And over the last 10 years, prior to us gaining control of the legislature, we've seen dramatic and drastic cuts to local government aid. It's shifted more and more of the tax burden onto rural Minnesota. We've seen our property taxes going through the roof, and we've seen funding for our services decline. It's a pay more and get less strategy, which is devastating for rural Minnesota. We're finally put an end to that. We've finally started to treat rural Minnesota equally under the tax policies of the last year. And I hope that we continue moving in that direction, start to rebuild what we've lost over those years. And we in rural Minnesota, for instance, I know there's some who think, we shouldn't be getting any assistance at all from the state, that feel that we're too small to justify having a nursing home or having a school or having a hospital in our communities. But I believe that it shouldn't matter where you live. You deserve to have good quality services at an affordable price, even if you're living in a more remote, sparsely populated area of the state like the one that I represent.
I don't know anybody in the legislature who believes that, Democrat or Republican, who would say that people in any of our towns are second-class citizens. I don't know. I've never heard anybody say anything like that. So if you've heard that, I'll have to defer to you. It certainly has never come out of my caucus.
I'm just saying certain policies are treating rural Minnesota as second-class citizens, and it's time for that to stop, and it's time to start treating all Minnesotans equally, and to make sure that even if we're living in a remote, sparsely populated area of the state, like I said, like my own, we deserve to have good quality services, a decent education for our kids. We deserve to have good quality health care for our citizens, good long-term care for our seniors, good roads and bridges for our communities, and that's what we're moving towards under the latest policies that we've been implementing.
And I agree with that. That's why I'm such an advocate for changing the education funding formula, because you are getting a bad deal relative to the central cities. Same old story.
Well, let's move on to another hot topic that has engendered some conversation, and that is this question of the minimum wage. We have a viewer from Maynard who notes that the House has voted for a $9.50 indexed minimum wage, while the Senate favors 950 without indexing. It's in conference committee. Constitutional amendment was discussed and then withdrawn. Where do Senators Thompson and Eakin stand on a $9.50 minimum wage that's indexed to inflation? Senator Thompson, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would oppose it. And if you look at the objective data out there, it wasn't too long ago, I'd say maybe 3-4 weeks ago roughly, the Congressional Budget Office, which I don't think anybody considers a partisan organization on either side, put out some data indicating the degree of unemployment that would be caused by radically raising the minimum wage. I certainly don't agree we should index it for inflation. I don't think anything like that should be put on autopilot. The other thing, too, is it's really tough on our border cities. When you look at East Grand Forks, where I grew up, Moorhead, you look at of course, Duluth, next door to Wisconsin. They're competing in the restaurant industry and other industries with businesses across the state line that are just so much more competitive that it's very harmful. Now, people will say, well, Dave, don't you believe that the minimum wage helps some people? Oh, sure. If you happen to be one of those people that is earning, the minimum wage now, or earning $8 an hour, and if it gets raised to $9.50, sure, you benefit. But you got to look at the people that are going to lose their jobs. And again, this is not a partisan idea. This is something that objective analysts admit, and they say, yes, some people will increase their standard of living, but there will be a lot of unemployment, and unfortunately, among young and unskilled laborers who are the very people that we need to get engaged in employment and get to have experience and an opportunity to learn a work ethic.
Yeah, and I do support a minimum wage increase, and I actually did sign on to the 950 bill, and there's a lot of moving parts to it as well, however, and I've made it clear that I think we at the state level should make sure that we're practicing what we preach. And there are a lot of people that are dependent on us for their pay, including those that are working in nursing homes. It includes those that are providing services and taking care of people with disabilities and seniors in their homes through the waivered programs. And we need to make sure that they, too, are being given a wage increase. And I think it's important to note that with a minimum wage increase, we're talking about people who are going to put that money right back into their economy again. So it's going to really act as an economic stimulus to help promote more economic activity. And these are people who haven't had wage increases or whose wages have been falling behind for years as a result of inflationary increases. And so I think it's time. The minimum wage has definitely fallen way behind what it used to be when you take into consideration the inflation. So I think it's time that it be done, and I think that it'll be good for the economy if we do so.
Your thoughts on the indexing piece, and what do you think is going to happen in these various committees where this bill is residing presently?
Right, and that's one of the moving parts that we're talking about,
right,
too. There's a lot of, it's not just the number and how long, there's the question of the phase-in as well. How long till we get to the 950? I think we're looking at, the 3-year phase-in before it steps up all the way to the 950. And then beyond that, whether there's going to be indexing and whether it should be indexed to inflation, or there's discussion, too, about whether there should just be a certain increase, for the next several years out. But certainly, I guess on the issue of indexing, I think that's still in question at this point. But I think the 950 level has probably been set. That's a tentative agreement between the House and the Senate conferees that have been working on this issue. But there's the issues of the training wage, of course, too, and there's about the small business minimum wage. There's a different minimum wage that would apply to small businesses. Currently, it's under $625,000 a year of income. I think that they're looking at that, or $500,000 a year and lower, to have a lower minimum wage for them. But a lot of moving parts. The indexing, I think, is still in question. But the conference committee is working on that right now, and I don't know what they'll come up with. But again, there was that tentative agreement to 950.
And the reason that there's a conference committee dealing with this is that there were, in this 2-year period, there were House and Senate bills that passed, and so it goes to the conference committee, even though they passed last year.
Right.
Senator Thompson, we heard some discussion last week for the first time about the possibility of this constitutional amendment to do the indexing piece. Is that dead now? Is that over, or is that still something that might surface before the session's over?
I don't know. It sounds like it's something that the Democrats have wanted to move. I find it mind-boggling that they have taken quite a bit of liberty beating us up for putting 2 constitutional amendments on the ballot in 2012, which, by the way, is below the average since the state was organized. But be that as it may, whether or not that was prudent, we've taken a lot of heat for having done that. And in fact, the Majority Leader, Senator Bach, had a bill in front of the State Government Committee that I sit in. Senator Dick Cohen, the chair of the Finance Committee, was having a companion bill there trying to require a supermajority of the legislature to get constitutional amendments on the ballot because they believe it should have a higher threshold. And then a week or 2 later, we're talking about trying to give people raises through a constitutional amendment. It's borderline humorous.
What do you think, Senator Eakin? Is that constitutional amendment to index, is that dead, or is that still alive in the legislature?
I don't think it's going to go anywhere because there was a significant amount of opposition towards using that method of resolving this issue. I think that one of the reasons it was brought forward is because I believe it's about 11 states that have done that with indexing, and I think all but one or so, it was most of them, I think almost all of them that did do it through constitutional amendment or did it through some kind of initiative and referendum.
Which, of course, Minnesota doesn't have.
Which we don't have.
Right.
So constitutional amendment is the only way that the people would have an opportunity to, take a vote on the issue themselves.
All right, a viewer from that unidentified town again wants to know, are we going to let the NFL get tax-free benefits to host the Super Bowl? Haven't we given enough? I think we can discern the viewers' stand on this issue. Senator Thompson, any talk on the National Football League, tax-free benefits, Super Bowls, et cetera? Yeah,
well, this is a tough issue to talk about because obviously most of us enjoy professional sports. I certainly do, Vikings fan, have watched them since I was a little kid. And it's exciting to have a Super Bowl. I remember when we had the Super Bowl here in the early 90s. Everybody likes that. I really believe that the taxpayers have dug deep enough now for the National Football League over the last couple of years. The funding mechanism has completely fallen apart. And so we're somehow going to have to pay for the stadium now, presumably out of the general fund or using some other method. And so I don't think that the taxpayer should have to dig in the pocket one more time for the National Football League. And what I would hope, because of course what we hear is, well, if we don't, other cities are going to do it and we'll never get a Super Bowl. I would hope that maybe the league would take into consideration that we are in the process of asking the taxpayers to cough up quite a bit to help with the Viking Stadium, and that we'd get that Super Bowl anyway. Obviously, I'd love to have it here. I just think it's pretty hard to justify turning to the taxpayer yet again for this.
And this is something that's probably been talked about more in the tax committee, which I don't serve on, but I do think it would be a great benefit if we could have a Super Bowl here. I don't know all of the benefits, but I think you got to look at the costs and the benefits before making decisions like that. And I certainly think it's something that's worthy of looking into. But I have not yet decided whether I would support it or not. I'd have to look at the cost-benefit analysis, I guess, to see how it would cost out. But certainly bringing more economic activity into the state of Minnesota would be a good thing. But how to do that, I'd prefer to be able to do it without giving benefits or tax benefits to an entity that's already generating a lot of profit.
So we have a question from a viewer about the bonding bill, and that is with respect to projects that the panel would like to see included or excluded. Are there specific projects that you think are worthy or specific projects you'd like to see not included? Senator Eakin, any thoughts on that?
Well, on the bonding bill, I've already mentioned that my top priority is flood mitigation and trying to finish up the flood mitigation projects that are getting close to being done. As you know, if it's close to being done, it doesn't really do much good. You got to get that last piece in place, and until you do so, the investments that have been made thus far don't really provide much benefit. So we need to make sure we finish those things up. And the colleges and the universities, I think the asset preservation projects that are out there, the HEAPR projects as they're called, these projects need to be well funded in order to maintain the buildings that we currently have. And I think that's a top priority in education. I'm carrying legislation also to expand a diesel mechanic facility at M State in Moorhead. That's a growing area of the economy. Obviously, we're an ag-based economy, and there's a real demand for that. I think that would be an economic boon to our area. So there's a lot of very worthy projects out there, and as I already said, unfortunately, we only have so much money that we can appropriate. So we may end up leaving some worthy projects on the table just because there's not enough money to accommodate all of those worthy projects that are out there. And just one last thing on the bonding bill generally. There are many economists around the country who really view us as underutilizing that tool, that this is a tool that is underutilized in Minnesota. Other states use their bonding tool much more aggressively than we have. We're actually among the lower in the nation when it comes to how much we bond, and the bonding tool is again very, very important to the economic vitality of our state moving forward, because it's all going into our infrastructure.
Well, a project I've been watching closely down near Cannon Falls is the Billsby Dam that needed some work, and actually there was a provision in the bonding bill a couple of years ago, and they need a little bit more money to take care of that project. I think that's important. I agree with Kent that we need to maintain our infrastructure, our buildings. You know, we're much better off taking care of them along the way and maintaining them just like you would your house, so that you don't have problems that result from not maintaining. And again, back to this transportation piece, roads and bridges. The projects I don't like to see in there are convention centers, you know, projects that are aimed at a specific legislative district. And gee, it's just incredible how generally, if you look at where those are done, there's a vulnerable legislator there that, you know, is trying to get their pork to get reelected. And I think that's the kind of thing that the public looks at and just shakes their head. So for me, it's that infrastructure piece. It's doing legitimate projects and then staying away from the pork projects.
I think we, too, need to look at projects that save us a lot of money in the long run, and that flood mitigation falls into because...
And I forgot to mention that. I'm completely with you on that as well. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Senator Eakin, you indicated that you, Chair, are involved in the Elections Committee. This is an election year. Is there election-related legislation that's moving through your committee that we should be talking to the viewers about?
Well, there is election-related legislation that's been moving. However, one of the things that the governor has said that he wouldn't sign into law bills that did not have bipartisan support. So anything moving forward would need to have bipartisan support in order to secure the governor's signature on it. So,
and do you see anything that falls into that category that's likely to come out of your committee or out of the Senate?
Yeah, last year was the year that I think we did most of that. So not as much this year. One issue that came up, there's some interesting bills that have come forward. One is known as National Popular Vote, which involves the election of the president. And right now, it's possible for the president to be elected with a minority of the popular vote and still get a majority of the electoral vote. And what the National Popular Vote would do is it would say that there'd be a certain number of states that have to agree to this, and when they reach a critical mass,
270 votes or more.
270 votes or more in the Electoral College, that all these states would agree that they would put their electoral votes towards whoever won the popular vote, and that would ensure that whoever wins the presidency would have won the popular vote. And that's one bill that was brought up this year in the Elections Subcommittee.
And that would be by legislation?
That would be by legislation. And we as a state would agree to join the coalition of states, and I'm not sure exactly where the number's at right now. It wouldn't bring us to the 270 mark yet, and it wouldn't go into effect until that would happen.
You know, I haven't seen the bill. I'm not on the Elections Committee, and so I will reserve judgment on any bill coming out of there until I see it. I will be honest, I haven't talked to a lot of people about that bill and don't really know what's there.
And nothing else moving as far as you know with respect to the election legislation?
Not a lot that I've heard talked about, no.
What about constitutional amendments? This is a constitutional amendment. If there's going to be, we have one question on the ballot already, as I understand it, having to do with legislative compensation, if I'm recalling correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. But are there any other I should say, constitutional amendments that might pass the legislature to go on the ballot in November? Senator Thompson, let's start with you.
I haven't heard about them other than this potential inflator for the minimum wage that it sounds like Kent says is now off the table. I've heard of no other ones, but there again, this would be one of those things that Doesn't even require the governor's signature. It's just a matter of a majority of the legislature passing them. And so really that's kind of in the hands of the majority. I haven't heard a lot of talk about anything else.
Well, in the minimum wage constitutional amendment, I didn't say it's off the table, but I don't think that it's probably going to go this year. And as far as other amendments, Senator Bach is carrying a constitutional amendment, as you had already mentioned, Senator Thompson, that would require a supermajority of the legislature to pass a constitutional amendment before it could be put on the ballot. And then you mentioned also the constitutional amendment that is going to go on the ballot. However, it's not going on the ballot this year. It's going to be going on the ballot in 2016.
Correct. Yes.
And that's the ballot, or that's the constitutional amendment that would remove the power of lawmakers to set their own pay, and to turn that power over to a citizens-only council that's appointed by the governor and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And it would be geographically balanced, it would be politically balanced, and it would be citizens only. There would be no legislators, no former legislators, no spouses of legislators, no lobbyists or former lobbyists serving on it, to try to remove all conflict of interest. And that's the reason that constitutional amendment.
Get rid of all the untrustworthy folks, huh?
So, just try to remove the conflict of interest there. And actually, that was an amendment.
They ban lawyers too, or
So,
no, never mind.
Lawyers are still on there. So, and that's a constitutional amendment that I authored. So, but that's going on the ballot in 2016.
Senator Thompson, anything about the constitutional amendments we haven't discussed, or anything else?
Not that I know of, no.
All right. We have a question from a viewer in Austin who wants to know whether or not the senators can explain why there are so many students qualifying for free or reduced price lunches in schools, wonders about the expansion of that program, doesn't want students to go home hungry, but is wondering if this is the best way to go about dealing with this issue. Of course, this came up in the context with a much reported incident involving some students at a school. Senator Thompson, any thoughts on this program and these issues?
Well, obviously, it goes without saying that a good night's rest and 3 square meals a day are very important to the success of a student at school. I think the question becomes, where do we draw the line on which folks are eligible? And it does seem, when I hear the numbers, as though I wonder how far the program has expanded. And the thing that we forget is, for everybody that gets something that's, quote, free, well, it isn't free. Somebody else had to pay the bill for that. And so I think it's certainly something we need to take a look at. And I hear many times myself numbers in terms of the percentage of students that are eligible, and really wonder if those guidelines need to be looked at. Again, keeping in mind that nobody is suggesting that breakfast and lunch and so on are not important to a student's ability to focus and learn. We understand that that is very important.
And I agree, that is very important, and we want to make sure it's in the benefit of our whole society that we make sure that these children and these students are being provided with the best quality education and being given every opportunity available to develop to their fullest potential. I think that increases in free and reduced lunches, I think, is an indication of the need for something like maybe minimum wage, which make sure that people are earning enough so that they're able to adequately provide for their families. And I think that that's absolutely essential to make sure that we have good paying jobs in our society. But definitely we need to make sure that our children are being well cared for, that they're being adequately fed, that they're being adequately clothed, adequately sheltered, so that they have stability and that they have good nutrition so that they can develop to their fullest potential. And that is a benefit for our whole state. That is an investment in our society.
You know, a viewer from Bemidji wants to go back to the minimum wage question, and I'm going to direct this to you, Senator Thompson, because it seems like that's where the question was directed, and revisit this question. This viewer indicates that the viewer keeps hearing about lost jobs if the minimum wage is increased, and would like to have some identification of what jobs will be lost. I think it's a challenge to whether or not that statement is accurate. So let's hear your response to the minimum wage question, and maybe you can also respond to Senator Eakin's point here on that question.
Sure. Well, as I indicated when we first talked about this, it's not Dave saying that, it's the Congressional Budget Office saying that the minimum wage increases cause unemployment. Secondly, just economic theory and common sense tells you anytime you raise the price of something, less of it is demanded. And a wage increase is an increase in the price of labor. But I found it interesting that in my local paper, my home paper, there was an editorial slamming me for the position that I have taken and saying, no businesses, no nothing. They don't respond to a raise in the minimum wage. On the front page of that same paper, if minimum wage goes up, Lakeville VFW will close. So there's anecdotal evidence, there's CBO statistics, and there's common sense. When you increase the price of anything, there's less demand for it. And you talk to restaurateurs, again, particularly in our border cities, they'll tell you they just can't keep up.
Jobs lost, minimum wage. What do you think, Senator Eakin?
Yeah, well, I think, we need to take into consideration the fact that when the minimum wage is increased, again, that money does go right back into the economy again. So that helps to generate more economic activity and hopefully more jobs in the future. So as far as the job loss issue is concerned, it's probably a wash at best. It may actually create more jobs in the end because you're going to be generating that greater economic activity. So I don't think that the job loss argument is as strong. I do agree that we have to be careful that we don't do things too aggressively and too abruptly because obviously employers do need to be able to adjust and they do need to be able to plan. And I think in terms of small employers in particular, I do think that we need to have a lower minimum wage when we're talking about small businesses in the smaller towns because they really are struggling. And there are some these business people in these smaller towns who are themselves making less than the minimum wage when you count all the hours that they work and how much they're receiving. So I am sensitive to that issue, but the minimum wage hasn't been increased in quite some time. It's far behind what it used to be. I don't think just bringing the minimum wage up to what it used to be adjusted for inflation is going to create undue harm for our economy.
We've been kind of picking on you, Senator Thompson, so we'll give you the last shot on this question.
Right. The idea that raising the minimum wage puts money in the economy, no, it transfers it from one place to another. So if somebody over here gets a raise from $7.25 to $9.50 an hour, and say 3 or 4 employees get that raise, but the 4th or 5th employee has to be let go because the employer can't afford it, that has not increased money into the economy. Raising the minimum wage, transferring money from one group of people to another does not increase productivity or economic activity. It's a wealth transfer. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily always and under all circumstances bad, but you make it sound as though, well, that increased wage just creates more money in the economy. No, it doesn't. It takes it from someplace else.
All right, a viewer from Brooklyn Park wants to visit the question of whether or not the legislature would be willing to cut its size. And this viewer says that would be one way to reduce expenses. And various experts have weighed in on this question and think it might be a good idea or bad idea to cut our legislative size from 201 legislators to some smaller number. I think that could be done by statutory action, if I'm recalling correctly, but maybe the two of you could address that question. Has there been any discussion about that? If not this year, maybe for some future year. Senator Eakin? We'll ask the professor, the academic here about this question. We'll start with you.
And I do think that it could be done legislatively as far as the size of the legislature. We wouldn't be able to go to unicameral. That's in the Constitution, so that would require a constitutional change. And whether I would support it or not, I guess, depends on which legislators would be let go.
He'd want me to go. You wouldn't want him to go.
You both have lists, right?
Exactly.
You know?
But there hasn't been any discussion of that. And I think, we do have a relatively large legislature compared to other states. Actually, we have the largest state senate in the country in terms of the number of members, 67 members. However, I think it's important to note that our legislative district size is right in the middle. It's about average. We represent, what is it now, 79,000?
About 79,000, yeah, that's
79,000 people in each district. That's about average for a Senate district when you count all the ones around the country. So I think that that's good. I think we're right in the middle on that, and I think it's also all right to have close representation of the people because the smaller the district is, the smaller the number of people that you represent, the more accessible you are to the people of your district. And I think that it's good for people to not only know the name of their legislator, but to know them personally and be able to talk to them when they have an issue they want to discuss. And I think that leads to better representation in the legislative process.
If we ever got to the point where this was a large enough issue for the people that legislation got in front of me to decrease the size of the legislature, I would vote for it. To me, it's not a huge priority for many of the reasons that Kent stated. I think it makes it harder, again, on greater Minnesota legislators because due to the way the population is spread out, big legislative districts would get even bigger. That being said, if the people wanted to save money that way, I probably wouldn't stand in the way of it. But I have heard, back when we were in the majority here a couple of years ago, we had a senator, I'm trying to remember who it was, might have been Senator Jen Olson, but I'm not sure of that, who did actually have a bill on that issue, but it never really got any traction.
Viewer from Kensington wants to raise an issue. I'm not sure I'm going to be giving a fair representation of this viewer's question, but I'm counting on the panel to backstop me here. This viewer wants to know what's happening with the bill concerning Minnesota counties and board power. That's a pretty vague question, but do either of you know what that viewer's talking about? Legislation dealing with Minnesota's counties and the I think it might be the joint power boards, some of those kinds of issues. Is that of any help to either one of you?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that legislation or that bill. That's something that probably would be moving in the state government committee where they're dealing with the local government issues and so on. But it sounds like they're talking about joint power boards being established between counties to share services, which is something that's becoming more of an issue as we've seen, and I've been talking about how local governments have been cut in recent years. We've been seeing less and less funding coming from the state level, and I think in some counties they've been considering things of that nature.
Yeah, I am on the state government committee, and we have had a few bills go through dealing with the power of local governments to structure their governments differently. Specifically on that issue, I can't think of a piece of legislation right now that's moving, but it could be I've forgotten something too.
So I'll invite our viewer, if the moderator has mangled the question, which is a definite possibility here, you send us more information and we'll get to next week's panel on that question. We've only got a few seconds left. Do you have a prediction as to the date the legislature might go home very quickly, Senator Eakin?
Yeah, that's a dangerous guess to make. I think that it'll be closer to the deadline date,
May 19th, or whatever it is.
But
Yeah.
I think it'll be a little early.
That'd be my guess too. We usually find a way to go to the end.
All right, very good. I want to thank our truncated panel tonight. I want to thank you, the viewers, for joining us. I want to invite you to be back with us next week and every week until whenever it is the legislature goes home. Thank you and good night.
There's much more about your legislators online at pioneer.org. Find out more about the history of the program, who's been a guest, and watch all our past episodes. There's also a photo gallery, informative links, and much more. You can also get involved and stay in touch by following us on Twitter and join the discussion on our Facebook page. Thank you for watching Your Legislators. Your Legislators is made possible in part by the generous financial support of MAPE members, making Minnesota clean waters, safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans.